Human beings are searching for the personal experience of reality. They are seeking to come to understand themselves, to find a reason for their own existence.
And so you go round and round and round, ever chasing the illusion that there is something outside yourself, outside your here and now, to be attained that will make things better.
No guru, no method, no teacher, and no nothing else either.
Okay.
All right, welcome everybody. We have a special guest with us. We have Jessica. Jessica, how you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing all right, thank you. So we're going to do things a little bit different. I'm going to give you an option of a daily reading to start out with. Do you want the 365 Tao or a Cherokee Feast of Days?
Let's go Cherokee this time.
Okay. Just to make sure I'm on the right date too. It's the 31st, right?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. May 31st. In this age of defending and demanding rights, we are often faced with the question of who holds us back more than anyone else. And in all honesty, we must admit we are the ones. We narrow our vision and develop helpless and hopeless attitudes to defeat us, and yet we are the ones who speed us on as well. Our good attitudes keep us moving and active and able to do everything without reacting to the smallest incident as a barrier in our way. We are willing to work to initiate and set in motion the good of life and do it by not stepping on others. We keep a constant vigil over our thoughts and action. In this way, we follow our star and reach up that we may lift others up with us. Misfortunes do not flourish particularly in our path. They grow everywhere. And that was said by Big Elk. So how do you feel about that daily reading?
I mean, I definitely think that's true, that sometimes your biggest obstacle is yourself. I mean, I've definitely remember points in my life where I've just gotten to a point and made a decision, and I've surprised myself with that I could actually make a decision and follow through with it. And, you know, it's definitely, I definitely agree with that. I think it's true. I also think it's hard and it takes a lot. You know, I could have just done this sooner and it would have been easier.
Yeah, absolutely. You cut out there for a little bit, but I think I got the general gist of what you were saying. You said it was hard and it takes a long time to get like comfortable with it or something like that.
Well, yeah. So like something that comes to mind is when I was younger, I definitely struggled in like social situations, especially like in school. It was super awkward, but I remember coming into high school actually, and just deciding like, I'm going to be different. This is going to be different. You know, I'm going to be more open and talk to people. And honestly, like the friends I made in high school, I'm still friends with now, you know, a decade or more later. But I remember consciously making that decision. I don't know what, you know, I might've just been a really bad day at school when I was younger or something. And I was like, you know what, I'm not gonna let this get me down. I'm not gonna, you know, listen to all the negative things. I'm gonna start fresh. And I met really, really great people that accepted me for me, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if I had brought that confidence and maybe just like that acceptance earlier, you know, brought that up in myself earlier, if I wouldn't have been able to connect better, or like maybe not take things so personally when I was younger, you know?
Yeah, but at the same time, maybe it's the exact time when you were supposed to. Maybe you weren't supposed to develop it any sooner.
That's true.
I definitely know for me that reading was true as well. Like, and it's also very uncomfortable to take responsibility for pretty much all the misfortunes in your life and realizing that your perception of those situations is what's limiting you. But like for me, with having substance abuse issues and mental health issues, like taking responsibility for my own part in that and my own actions, perpetuating it further, it hurt, honestly. It hurt to know that I hurt myself that bad. But then that's when all the change can occur, because I can change things that I'm doing to myself. I can't change anything else in the world, definitely.
I feel like that particular thing is it's like the thing that makes you feel most empowered, but it's also the thing that makes you feel worse, because the worst, because then you realize like, well, I did this all to myself. Do you know what I mean? Like, oh, I can change it all, but also, what was I doing? Like, what was I doing before? Like, I made this mess of whatever the situation was,
It
So it's
definitely
sometimes hard.
It definitely can leave that vacuum. That's one of the things from like working steps, like being in a 12-step program. It talks about how at a certain point, once you admit powerlessness and how unmanageable your life has become, there's this huge vacuum in your life because you don't have the other necessary tools to really fill that void that you used to fill with substances from like running away from yourself. And over time, you learn to develop like faith in a higher power, whether that's the universe or whatever. And then it helps you look at your life holistically. At least for me, it has. I can't speak for other people's experiences, but looking at my life holistically and seeing that everything that I've been through, as uncomfortable as it was, had a purpose, because now I can share direct experience with other people going through those situations and say, look, I totally fucked myself over, but now I'm in this position where I'm helping myself and I can help you through my suffering. So it was like almost paying tuition into this universal school of education of how to live a better life. That's how I frame it, at least.
Well, no, that's true. I mean, that makes sense. I mean, that's good. That's the idea that everything happens for a reason and it's a lesson. And that's definitely like, if you're able to take that perspective, I think it's whether at the end of the day that ends up being true or not, because that's something that I've like more and more thought about lately. But whether it ends up being true that there was like a plan or there wasn't a plan, it's definitely more beneficial for you in the moment to say, you know what, this was a lesson. This is a lesson. This was a lesson. What can I do with this experience, whether it was a good experience or a bad experience? What did I learn from it, as opposed to, laying down and being like, well, this is awful. Like, what, why did this happen to me? Why did that happen to me in the past? Why was I put here? Definitely more empowering to look at it as, what did I learn and what can I do with this?
Mm-hmm. That's one of the things, like, I don't necessarily know that there's like this definitive plan about things, but it's funny how like when all this shit's going wrong in our lives, it's why is this happening, to be like there's some kind of plan, or like we're attracting this negative stuff, but at the same time we won't take that there's some kind of plan for good things in some senses. And I don't think that I think it's beyond what humans are able to comprehend, honestly. I think that what's actually occurring, we don't have the hardware to comprehend, and some of the more enlightened people or more dialed in people can get a glimpse of it. They can get like a very faint understanding, the tip of the iceberg, but they can't see what like the 99% of it under the surface. That's
just
go ahead.
No, I definitely agree. It is sometimes, like, you think about it, you get in these like I don't know, sometimes it just feels so like big and confusing. It just like, it's crazy. And I read something recently, like I don't know, one of these memes on Facebook or something, where it was like, like in all those movies about time travel, they're like, oh, if you go back in time, it's like so imperative that you don't change anything, because like a little change like has all these ripples. And then the meme's like, well, why don't people think about that in their day-to-day lives? Like, if you're worried about going back in time and something small making a big difference in the future, why don't you take the little decision, or why don't you take things seriously now, that a decision you make now can make a big difference in the future? Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. I saw that meme and it blew my mind.
Yeah, it's a crazy thing to think about.
For sure. But like looking at my path over the past like 21 months of like stopping using substances and moving to now, it's been lots of little changes that have led me to where I'm at. And like even the whole concept of, you can turn the whole current of a river based upon these little stones that you put in the way. If you do it on a long enough timeline, do it bit by bit, you can change the whole way that a river flows. One of the concepts I talked about earlier on this podcast was actually persistent incrementalism, or the philosophy of natural change. And it talked about like how, if you look at the Grand Canyon or something, for example, that was this persistent but gradual stream of water flowing there. So there was minute changes on a constant basis, like little particles of sand being removed from the surface to carving out this huge canyon. Yeah, exactly. And I think that like people tend to forget that. It's like even now with like doing stuff for the business end of what I'm trying to do, I get so caught up in trying to make all these enormous changes that that becomes completely disempowering, looking at it at a very big way. But when I set up like these micro goals and I take small actions towards those goals on a persistent basis, it's amazing what I can actually accomplish.
That's true. That's true. Definitely taking it like one step at a time. But then also sometimes like then, at least for me, like sometimes then I get caught on like on little decisions. Like, so on one hand, like a little decision like can make, you know, like if you make little changes over time, it makes a big change. But also if you look at it that way, then like, then it can be crippling. Like, well, do I take this, like, do I do this today or that today? Or do I take this job or that job? Then you're like, well, oh my God, like this little decision could change the rest of my life. You know what I mean? Like, then you get caught on these little decisions. Then it's like, then you feel crippled. Like, oh my God, now I can't make any decision. Like, should I wear the blue shirt or the red shirt? Like, I don't know. You know, now it's crazy. So
I've heard people call that analysis paralysis.
Yes.
And I've definitely had that. And one of the things I'm grateful for is one of the things that I've learned in the fellowship that I'm in is first thought wrong. At least like at one phase of my recovery, that was it, because my first thought is based on my conditioned behavior usually. So it's what's most comfortable for me. And when I start to learn to do what's uncomfortable for me, that can actually change my reality. Because if I always do what's comfortable for me, there's that old saying, no growth occurs in the comfort zone. So which one am I least comfortable with? And then ultimately looking at it holistically, if it's the difference between one thing or the other, what's the worst that could happen if, say, I wear the blue shirt instead of the red shirt? And secondly, like, you have to have this element, or I should say, I have to have this element of play to see, well, what's going to happen if I do this? Like, what will this choice do rather than what will the consequences be?
That makes sense. But I think so this kind of ties into what you were saying that you want to talk about today about centeredness, because there's so much information, like especially like since I've started like kind of trying to read more and learn more about, like, since I've decided to like try to grow more myself and like expand like about different topics, there is so much almost conflicting like information. Like on one hand, it's like, like let go and pay attention to your intuition, and a lot of things tell you like to go with your gut feeling, which would be your first instinct. But in a case like you were saying, if you're in a pattern of behavior that's maybe not beneficial to you, then going with your instinct is the wrong thing to do. So it really takes, I think, a lot of being honest with yourself to say, well, okay, my first instinct, maybe for me, going with my gut instinct is not the right thing. So maybe for you, like going with your gut instinct in the beginning is not the right thing because you need to break out of that pattern. But for me, so like someone that over analyzes and ends up not doing anything, maybe going with my gut instinct is the right thing. But there's so much out there, and there's so much like books and podcasts and blogs and all this stuff, and it is hard to really like filter through it. And I think that it comes back to what you, like I said, you wanted to talk about before about centeredness. Like you really do have to find the balance that's right for you between like, I need to break out of my comfort zone maybe in this area of my life, but in another area of my life, maybe I need to trust my instincts more. Like, for example, maybe in your business, you need to trust your gut instinct about like a new partner or something. But maybe in your social life, you need to break out of the old patterns because you want something something new, you know? It's subjective for the person, but also maybe even subjective in an individual's life with the different situations, you know?
Yeah, it's constantly shifting for me because I was at this phase where I had to ignore my gut instinct for a while, or my first thought more so. I think instinct and first thought are different things too in some ways.
Okay.
In my own experience, they are. And it
Okay.
could just be semantics, but instinct's more of a feeling. Thought is more just of what my mind's telling me, which is conditioned behavior. But here's the thing. I can't rely on any of those things 100% all the time. And it's really using intuition to discern when I need to listen to my intuition and when I need to listen to my mind. And it's confusing. Um, I don't know. Have you ever played video games?
I was really not a big video gamer, but go ahead with your example.
So in certain games, there's things that'll cause the controls to go all wonky. And it's almost like as soon as you learn the controls that they're wonky, they'll revert back to the regular controls. And it's like this constant shifting of mechanisms, I feel like. At least that's been my own experience, because that actually causes growth and helps you develop intuition more, and it keeps you out of patterns, because a lot of times our patterns can be negative. And also when we fall into patterns, for me particularly, I become very complacent and too comfortable in it. So there needs to be some dynamic element in my life. Otherwise, life becomes very bland and mundane. And that's a dangerous space for me as an individual.
No, I agree that that when you fall into a pattern, then there is no growth. So you do constantly have to push out of your patterns and what you're comfortable with, or else there is no growth. And that just makes sense for, I think, across the board, for, you know, for any, not even for people, but for animals, for, you know, for anyone. You do have to keep pushing out of your comfort zone.
Absolutely. And if you think about it, like, for me, the whole concept of being like centrist or being centered is about like kind of not necessarily being in this static point all the time, but moving in like a wave and going from one level to the next, to the next, to the next, which is like one of the issues I have with like the positivity movement overall, is that it's unhealthy to be in that state all the time. And a lot of times people aren't able to acknowledge things they're actually going through, because there's a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of it right now. A lot of meaningless statements that people say that do have meaning in some senses, but they also are dehumanizing to people suffering when they're going through it.
Right. And I know what you mean. Like, you can't just positive think. You can't only focus on good emotion. Like, you have to feel the bad emotion because it's there for a reason. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there's like negative emotions shaming in positive communities overall.
No, I can see that. I think that just like a lot of times I take it back to like the body, because the more that I read and stuff, I really feel like it's like the Chinese nesting dolls. I think that somebody else has made that like reference before, but I do feel like a negative emotion is like physical pain in the body, and nobody wants to be in pain. But a lot of times I think people miss the fact that like if you're feeling physical pain, or if you're experiencing negative emotion, that there's a reason for that. And a lot of times people just try to, you know, like take a medication to kill the pain, or, you know, try to kill the negative emotion with positivity or with an antidepressant or something. But nobody asks the question, like, if there is, like I said, in the body, if there's physical pain, then that's a signal that your body's trying to tell you something. So the point is to go in there and find out, well, why does my arm hurt? Is it broken? Is it sprained? Or am I doing something wrong? Am I overextending it? You know, am I twisting it too hard? What am I doing that's signaling, you know, slow it down, or whatever, you know, whatever the case may be. What does that mean? And I feel like maybe that's where it's good to be positive, but you do have to ask yourself, what is this emotion telling me? What am I supposed to learn from this? You know?
Absolutely. It goes back to that daily reading about like accountability, essentially taking responsibility. And I definitely think that positivity has a place because it's something that helped me, but it goes back to being in like a more centered space with it and a more grounded space with positivity, because sometimes I find people in these new age circles that are completely detached from like physical reality in some ways, and they kind of they're on like this upper pole of what that whole movement is, in my opinion and experience, and that can be very damaging, not only to themselves but to every other person in their life, and it can create a lot of havoc.
No,
Almost like a manic
definitely agree.
state.
That's true. I agree. Like I think that, it's only as the high is only as you only get as high as the low is, and I think that you can't be. It's not healthy to be. Nobody's happy all the time, and if you think that you are, then there might, you must be burying something somewhere, because it's just not. I feel like that's not how people are wired to be on one setting all the time.
Yeah, there's a huge amount of denial if people are in that happy space all of the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. No, and that being said, I would say that over, like, most of my family and friends say, like, oh, you're so, you're positive all the time, blah, blah, blah. Like, and I do try to see you know, the positive end of it. I try not to let things get me down, or I try to see where the opportunity is. But at the same time, if something is not good, I won't like say, oh, it's okay, it'll work out. That you, like you said, you have to bring a centeredness and a balance to it.
Mm-hmm.
You recognize where there's injustice, or where there's pain, or where there's, whatever bad or negative thing. You recognize it, but then you can use it, like you said, and make it into an opportunity.
Yeah, that's my main thing. If something sucks, I'm like, well, this is bullshit. I don't like this. But at the same time, there's a good opportunity for me to learn this lesson. And I mean, I'll sometimes I go kicking and screaming about learning the lesson, but like I still acknowledge that it's there. And most of the time afterwards, I'm better off for it, because
Right.
repressing those feelings and not feeling how I feel actually victimizes myself. But like I think that people need to strive for more centeredness too in other areas of their life, not just like thinking, but even in like the political arena, like the extreme left and extreme right. I'm so disgusted by both sides of the argument anymore. I'm just like, is there any rational people left? Like,
I know. No, I definitely agree. We are so, everybody's so caught up in like their own, like, one like side, that there is nobody's willing to listen. And in so many topics, like, I would a couple, like, when the election happened, I was like super involved. Like, I was watching, stuff on TV all the time, and reading articles online all the time, and I feel like I backed I had to back away from it a little bit, because it gets so consuming, and it's a lot of times so negative. And I do, like, you just can't help but get sucked in to the whole scenario. But when you really, like, step back, like I've been trying to step back and, like, not really be so involved, you see that people aren't, their opinions aren't really that different. They just can't acknowledge that the other side has a valid point. Like, for example, my husband's, like, family is very, very much Republican, and my family is a very much Democratic leaning. And for me and my husband, politics don't, like, play that much of a role in our day-to-day lives. Like, we talk about it, but we're not like, I hate you, or I hate anything in particular. But we talk about the gun issue all the time. And his opinion is that, and he's a teacher as well. So like, all these school shootings kind of, they hit us closer to home. And his opinion is that, the people that are fighting for guns believe that it's their right as a people, as a sovereign person, to be able to protect themselves from a government that could become, I guess, like, overinflated with power. And that was the original idea behind behind the amendment that allows people to bear arms, to be able to rise up against a government that you think is overstepping its bounds, like they did with the British in the American Revolution. And I truly believe that the people like the Democratic side would agree with that, because these are the same people that do think that there's too much, like that some people in government are overstepping their bounds, or like some people in authority are overstepping their bounds, but they don't talk about that side of it. And I think everyone agrees that nobody wants like school shootings, and nobody wants kids to die, and nobody wants anybody to die, you know, in gun violence. But they don't talk about like the medium, like how do we control, like how do we put the proper checks in to make sure that people that shouldn't have guns don't have guns, or that people that have, you know, violent histories or criminal records or whatever it is that would predispose them to use things the wrong way. You know, why don't they focus on that? No, you know, it's all or nothing. There is no centeredness, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. That was actually one of the topics I wanted to bring up too. So I'm glad you brought that up, because it really is like, I'm not opposed to people having guns, but there needs to be more control on it. And there's certain guns the general public doesn't need to have, in my opinion. But at the same time, I don't think taking away guns is from everybody is the solution. It goes back to that like t-shirt from the movie Happy Gilmore, where the guy has a shirt that says, guns don't kill people, I kill people. And it's really about the individual.
I agree.
But also one of the things is in our bully culture, it really is more about creating more of a better policy for gun control, but still allowing people to have guns, but also learning to talk to other people better and encouraging more community-based relation to people, to have people talk less aggressively to people overall, but B, to help people learn to deal with criticism better. But it's the same kind of concept where people bully people so people can stand less. And it's like every issue that we almost face culturally is due to these polar opposites, and each pole further perpetuates the other pole.
It's true. They poke, you know, one side pokes fun at the other side, and then they have to respond. And I do think it, even like when you try to be in the middle, like, you know, you read all these things that are just so like hate filled, you know, offensive material, and it's hard to really say, like, you know, I'm not gonna pick a side, or I'm not gonna get involved, because you read this stuff and it's like, my God, how could this be? But I don't know, it's just I do think that people they hit low, you know. There's no real decorum in discussing things anymore, you know what I mean?
For sure. And it's funny because both sides will use tactics of the other side and then vilify the other side for using those tactics, but they do the same shit. And it's just like, as somebody who doesn't have any political leaning one way or another, doesn't support presidents really at all, doesn't support the concept of it, because I just view them as a figurehead for the corporation that is the United States of America. Like, I don't buy into the whole thing. I think they're all just money-grubbing assholes who are trying to do what's best for their own self-interest. And some of them will put a veneer of doing things for the people, but historically their actions don't ever live up to their words. And people will disagree with me when they look at ex-president that they support. But how much of that is kind of like this Rorschach test of seeing what you want in those situations? Yeah, exactly.
No, I gotcha. I mean, I don't know. I've only really gotten into politics, like the political, like readings and stuff now, after the last election. And I don't know if that's because of like, we're just like getting older, and now it just is more relevant to my life, or if, you know, if it's just like the whole circus that this last election was. Like, I don't know what like really got us in there, but no, I definitely agree that, I don't know, I wonder if politicians, because I feel like a lot of them go in there and they seem like good people and they want to make a change. And I wonder if it's not like they get there and they realize, like, my God, this is much more complicated than I had thought, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Here's the thing, like on a very real level, I don't genuinely think that evil is a real thing. I think that it's largely caused by trauma or by fear, and that fear causes greed and all these other behaviors. Like, so evil, I think, is an oversimplification of the complexities as to why people do what they do. But at the same time, I feel like a lot of these people have separated from their integrity and what their core values are, and they live in such denial that they can't even see it or acknowledge it.
I agree. And I've seen that before too, where like all negative, like, things come from fear. I actually think that was actually a really interesting thing for me to learn. And I can see that, like, that, you know, like racism and greed and, you know, like even just bullying, it does all come from fear. And I don't know, I don't know how really as a society we can get away from that. I've seen a lot of like things about people saying like, oh, it's like trying to bring like different groups together, you know, like groups that historically fight, like Israeli and Palestinian kids, and having them play together to like get rid of that fear of each other, like that stigma. Once you meet someone, once you know someone, you can't be afraid of them. You know what I mean? You're afraid of what you don't know. And I don't know if I really don't know how we're going to get away from that as a society. Like, you would think with Facebook and all like the things that connect us now, that you'd be less afraid, I guess, of different people and different ideas, but it doesn't seem that it works that way.
I think the real issue that's preventing people from connecting with other people is they're not connecting to themselves on a deep level, because we see other people. We can only meet other people as deeply as we've met ourselves. So like a lot of people have to become the change that they want to see. And that's uncomfortable for a lot of people, and it freaking hurts. And it goes back to the daily reading again in lots of ways, where it's about taking accountability and recognizing that, like, if even let's just say Donald Trump, like a lot of people hate that guy, all this stuff. And like, there's times when I really get upset with his actions, but on like a core level, he's still a human being, and he's suffered trauma that makes him act the way that he does, present himself the way that he does. And I will not sign off on any of his behaviors and say that I find them acceptable. But at the end of the day, he's still a person and he deserves love. And that's not because of anything that externally has happened to me. It's from working in myself and actually finding a community that like accepted me for as I was, even when I was broken. It allowed me to heal, but I had to heal internally. So it really is, it's largely holding space for other people and letting them heal themselves, and trying, instead of, I think that's one of the issues our culture faces too, is forcing solutions on other people that aren't ready to actually understand it. And that whole attitude of, here, take the frickin' medicine, makes people resistant to whatever is being offered.
No, I agree that that sometimes maybe you just have to try to you don't have to condone the action, but you have to understand it. Like, so maybe you're saying that you don't necessarily agree with what all of the things that this person is doing, but you can look back at, you know, their experience and look at where they are and say, well, I understand why you're doing this. And maybe that's where they're at, and that's where you have to meet them, because then that will allow them to, when they're ready, go beyond. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, accept
like we have
people.
to give them.
No, go ahead.
No, you mean like just accept them for where they are, and just understand it. You don't have to say this is a good thing, but I understand why you're doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the things too that our culture really struggles with is like we put these labels of good and bad on every action. And the
Mhm.
reality is that maybe those actions are displeasing or they're not the behavior that we would like to see. But when you consistently say good or bad, then you start identifying people based on all of their behaviors rather than the core essence of them. And what you focus on grows too. So if you start identifying this person with all their negative behaviors and never looking for anything good that they've ever done, it's very easy to oversimplify this whole person's existence to say this person is this, they've never done anything good, and completely look at
Shut
people
them
in a
off.
negative. Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's one of those things where it's not about condoning behavior, it's looking at it from an empathic point of view. Like, and that's one of the things too, a lot of people have this misconception of empathy where if anything's unpleasant, a little bit prickly, a little bit unsatisfying, they'll project it on other people. Other people are making me feel this way. And it's like something in you is feeling discomfort by that person because you're not willing to actually connect on a deeper level, which is okay. But I think that there's this whole damaging concept that empaths have where they're supposed to be completely put off by other people's energy, completely like shaken by people. And when you really begin to cultivate gifts as an empath and really work with people, your gift is only as valuable as you can make it. And if you never reach outside of your comfort zone, again, like which is another reoccurring theme in our conversation, like if you never reach outside of your comfort zone, you can never really develop it and actually help people. And it's like for me, in my experience, working with people in mental health situations, working with people that have been heroin junkies for numbers of years, like on like a face-to-face basis, listening to the suffering other people have been through and inflicted. So a lot of empaths would run from that. I can't handle that. I can't take that on. And I'm not like ego stroking because it was uncomfortable as hell at some point. But at a certain point, you have to recognize, or maybe I should say I had to recognize that in order to actually utilize my own gifts and to connect with people and to do the work internally to help the world overall, I have to overcome those self-imposed limitations of thought. And again, accountability.
Right. You have to know yourself. I know, like, I hear the empath like talk all the time, and I do feel like I feel people's emotions, but I I definitely had to learn where, and maybe this is something I need to work on because I have this, I talk about this all the time. So I'm a pharmacist and my sister is a nurse. And I maybe not nicely make fun of her all the time, and I tell her she has no feelings, but in the sense that she can detach, I think, like from, like she sees more suffering than I would, I think that we both have like an inclination to help people, but I would definitely get caught in the in the the dying and the sadness of of people, and that's not something that I could handle. Like, I've been to, like I said, I'm a pharmacist, so I've had people come in and tell me like my mom passed or my dad passed or something, and they cry, and then I cry too, and it's like it's just a big mess. We're standing at a counter, like, with the store like surveillance cameras on there, and we're crying, and like, but I do feel that, but it's hard for me to process. Like, I don't think that I would be able to go in every day and then deal with that, and then come home and have like just like a regular, have dinner and go to a movie or something. But I tell her all the time, like, oh, you have no feelings, because she'll come back, she'll come and tell me like, I saw this case today where such and such happened. I'm like, my God, that's a person, like they died. But she more looks at it as like in like the educational side of it, like, I saw that this process happen, or this, we use this technique or whatever it is. She looks at it as she's learning, and maybe she'll use that to save, and in the next case maybe that'll save somebody's life. Whereas I'm like, my God, that's terrible. I can't, I couldn't deal with that. You have no feelings. I can't handle that. But maybe it's me having to learn that to process better. because there is a place, you need people to be able to dive in there and be with you when like there's a lot of sadness and that type of emotion.
For sure. One of the concepts that my therapist had really brought up to me at one point, because actually the empathic ability is relative to a psychological condition as well called borderline personality disorder, where you can literally feel other people's emotions. So learning to quote unquote shield is what it's called in sometimes metaphysical circles. I think there's a different name for it in psychological circles, but learning to disconnect from feeling your emotions in certain situations is actually a valuable thing to learn, because then you can hold space on a deeper level and you aren't so swayed by it as much. And you can actually learn to be more rational in those situations than being carried away by your emotions, because emotions are something that definitely make us human, but they're also one of the things that can really sidetrack us and take us off our paths at times too, which is funny because earlier I said we have to feel our emotions, but you have to, like in my experience, I have to discern when my emotions are valid and when my emotions are being like, where are they coming from really?
I don't know if it's a question of validity more as, is this useful like to me right now? Do you know what I mean? Like, so I feel like if you, in my opinion, if you feel something, then that's always valid, but is it useful right now? Like, so like, I'm afraid of something. Yes. Now, is this fear useful to me? Like it's not useful if it's going to paralyze me and I can't get out of the situation I need to get out of. But in another sense, is the fear valid when, you know, I'm in a situation where it's telling me like, oh, maybe this person's not a good person to be with, like, maybe this is not a good place for me to be right now. So I feel like it's always valid. It's always telling you something, but when is it useful? And something that I learned that I actually really liked, that helped me deal with, like, sometimes I could get anxious or, you know, or just, like I said, I do feel things a lot, was, I don't remember where I heard it, but it said to feel like the physical feeling of the emotion. So like, I don't know, maybe I'm stressed about something. And for me, that stress is like, I feel it like almost like heartburn kind of feeling in my stomach, like a burning. So it's, and then I can focus on, like, if I decide that, all right, this anxiety is not useful for me right now, like I'm at work and it's not, you know, it's not useful for me to be worried about, like, I've got this goal to meet by this deadline. Like, because sometimes like if I get too anxious, then I just feel like I can't, like it's too much. I have to like relax and give up, you know, like I can't do this. So if I can recognize that feeling, then I can focus on the physical. So like, for example, with that anxiety, I felt that like almost like queasiness in my stomach. And honestly, like I'll take a Tums, and if I can fix like the physical feeling, then I can say, okay, you know what? I feel better, you know? All right, now that anxiety wasn't useful. Let me refocus, get back to like just, you know, this is what I need to do in the next hour. Let me get this done and, you know, and it'll be fine. But focusing on what the physical feeling feels like, or my heart's racing, like, okay, let me take a moment, like do a couple deep breaths. And now the heart rate went down. Like, okay, now I can focus on, I got to go give this presentation, or I got to make this phone call to my boss, whatever it is. Let me take a second. I slowed down my heart rate. Now I can do what I need to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mindfulness and breathing is definitely the way that I like center myself in those situations. But yeah, learning how to just like, I like how you talked about useful rather than valid, because I think that that's a fair point to make. But a lot of the times, one of the things I've learned is anxiety and enthusiasm are really the same energy. It's just how they're directed. So like anxiety is more in the fear space, and enthusiasm is more in like the love create space. So a lot of that stuff can be redirected, and that's like something else too, learning how to redirect it. Like, okay, I have anxiety because I'm not taking action on this, or because I feel that I need to take action on it. And then from like learning cognitive behavioral therapy or dialectical behavioral therapy, Does this need to happen now? Well, no. Do I need to worry? Is worrying about it going to solve this? No. Like, and then I go through all these like questions in my head, like this checklist of questions. And then I'm like, oh, and then like, I can almost laugh at myself. And one of the things, laughter definitely is a good medicine because of the chemicals it releases. And then something else, I heard somebody say this, and I don't know the actual truth behind this statement, but they said that gratitude, like when you actually physically have gratitude and think thoughts of gratitude, it releases a certain chemical that breaks down cortisol, which I don't know that scientifically that's true, but
I don't know either.
I'm telling myself that even if it isn't true, if I believe it long enough, it'll work for me.
No, there's a lot of, I definitely agree that there's a lot of stuff that like if you believe it, like I see it all, like the placebo effect is a real thing. I see it all the time. It's actually really, it's really a strong, I'm stumbling on my words, but anyways, like I said, I'm a pharmacist, and it's really, so like I try to walk a line, like when I counsel my patients, when they pick up like a new medication or something, it's so funny that like I have to tell them how the medication works and what side effects to look out for. But sometimes if you can scare somebody into having having a side effect that I've never like experienced happen to anyone else. Like, do you know what I mean? Like you can almost like suggest it, almost like a magic trick, like a magician, like just suggests like that you look somewhere and you see it, or you find it. You can almost suggest someone like like that they will have a side effect, and they just have it. And though it's never happened in 10 years that I've been doing this, and I might say, oh, this might cause you to, I don't know, get a muscle pain or something. And then all of a sudden they were all like 100%, and then they have muscle pain. It's like, I'm like, what happened? Like, they'll call me back. Like, I took it and I have muscle pain. I'm like, well, when did you take it? An hour ago. I'm like, impossible that you have muscle pain because that pill is still in your stomach. It didn't go anywhere. Like, you can't, it's not possible. But they're like, no, I definitely have it. I'm like, okay, we'll do what we have to do. We'll call the doctor. But there's definitely something about what you believe. If you believe something will work, and if you believe it, it'll happen.
Yeah, there's that old saying by I think it's Henry Ford: whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you're right.
I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, I was this is kind of somewhat of a tangent, and then I'll like throw my opinion on the placebo thing. But I was talking to my sponsor or my dad, I forget who I was talking to, about like being successful with stuff. And I was like, with this business thing, I have to redefine things and keep going on. And I was like, the difference between people that are successful with doing businesses for themselves and the people that aren't is the people that want to do a business for themselves, or the people that are successful never gave up. So it's like, it's easy to stop, but it's not easy to keep going. So it's like, keep going. But like back to the placebo effect, there is a comedian, and he talks about how it's universally accepted that the mind has the power to make well. But then he says, why couldn't the opposite of that be true as well, that the mind has the power to make ill also? And he goes about like how he's smoking cigarettes, and he's like, I feel like this is cancer, this one's cancer. And then it's like, well, there's no wonder that people get sick from it. And I'm not saying specifically that obviously cigarettes are unhealthy. They're going to cause it regardless. But the more that you invest in that belief, the more likely it is to create that occurrence. And there's this whole concept too. I don't know if you've ever heard this saying: anxiety is praying for something that you don't want.
I've heard that for sure.
And I know that in my own experience, there's been so many times I've been anxious of situations, and like the situation's completely unrealistic for it to happen, but then I'm so anxious, and then it does happen. I'm like, what the hell? Like but it's like, I put that out there and attracted it to me. It's law of attraction in reverse, I guess, or for negative attraction.
Right. I definitely think that that's a possibility, because I think that that's, again, like coming back to like you said, the reading about taking responsibility, because I've found like and it's just about doing the work. Like, for example, I've found that a lot of times in my life, like when I've hit a real high, like a real high point, I feel like it's directly followed up by a low point. Like something extraordinary that'll happen, and then something terrible will happen, like almost back to back. And I've seen the pattern like cycle a couple times, and then like part of like this meditating that I've been like trying to do and just thinking about myself, I'm like, why does this happen? Like, let me take responsibility. What is it? Like, try to go back and figure out what am I doing that makes this happen? And like I kind of went back to like when I was younger. I remember so my parents are very old school, and they're very much like about like acting like properly and all that stuff. So I remember my dad telling me, even when I was little, like if something like exciting was happening, like we were going on a trip or we were going on vacation, he'll be like, like me and my sister would be like super excited, like maybe getting a little rowdy and loud, and he'd be like, don't get too excited, you have to focus on your test at school first. You know what I mean? Like very much like they're very much like want you to be like level-headed all the time, which is not a bad thing. But at the same time, I can see like maybe he like, it's like, don't make a mistake at school because you're too busy thinking about whatever you're doing later. Like, don't make a mistake at work because you're thinking about going out tonight, So I don't know if that's true, but that's as far back as I could think. Like, why is it that when like something really good is happening, I think automatically like, oh, something really bad can happen too? Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. It's one of the things that I think that our culture is conditioned with, like, or maybe it's just the world is conditioned with in general, that something bad will follow. And it's like one of the things for me, like on my whole path going forward with everything, is when something good happens, waiting for the shoe to drop, or like not thinking that good things will continue to happen.
Yeah.
But like when you look at things in a realistic and like centered point of view, bad shit's always going to follow good shit regardless. They're not connected to one another. It's not
Right.
bad shit happening because something good happened. It's
right.
Bad shit happens, good shit happens,
And
interrelated.
Unrelated, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, I guess I shouldn't say unrelated, but like they're related on like the holistic aspect of thing, but the bad didn't happen because the good did.
Right.
A
But I
lot of
almost
times.
find myself expecting like, like what's gonna happen now? You know what I mean? And that's the wrong like attitude to take about it. Like, I shouldn't expect something bad to happen just because something really good happened. I just, expect that whatever is going to happen is going to happen, and it'll just deal with what comes.
For sure. I actually want to share a quote that I found the other day with you, and then I want to read these headlines.
Mm-hmm.
And then I should probably get running. This has been a good conversation. Let me find it real quick. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So this is from a book that I just read. Let evil wait for the day on which it must fall. And that was said by Roland Duchesne, who's a character in the Dark Tower series by Stephen King. I really like that quote though. Let evil wait for the day on which it must fall, which is like, so when you have that good experience and you're like, oh, this shit's gonna hit the fan now. Just
They'd just
wait.
be like, it'll happen when it happens, and it's not.
It's not connected to this in any way, shape, or form. Unless you want to make it connected, then it is.
No, I get it. I definitely understand that.
So here is a couple headlines real quick. And the first one is Martian fossils could be hidden in ancient rocks, scientists say. And here's like a little snippet. I'll leave the link in the description of the podcast too, if you want to check it out later, or if anybody listening does. And it says an ancient bed of rock near a dried out Martian lake could contain alien fossils which prove life once existed on the red planet. Scientists said that the iron-rich sediments are the likeliest place to find fossilized microbes dating back 3 to 4 billion years. That was in a study done by Edinburgh, and Edinburgh has pointed out key locations for NASA's next rover on Mars in 2020. And should be able to collect that stuff. What do you think about that? Does that seem plausible?
I mean, I think it's impossible that there is no life anywhere else, and I think that I think that's quite possible. And didn't they find water or like ice on Mars already? So I mean, I think it's definitely possible. And also I think that, especially with like the outer like space, like finding extraterrestrial idea, I really think that maybe we make that distinction that it's life as we know it. Like there might be life in other forms that we just don't understand. You know, like we look at all these other planets, we're like, oh, there's no possibility for life. But everybody misses the thing afterwards. It's life as we know it. Like I think that there's definitely life, and maybe there's life on other planets close to us now, but it's just we don't know what, like we're looking for something that we recognize, but maybe it's in a form that we don't recognize yet, you know?
For sure. And that goes back to that whole centered viewpoint. Like, if you look at things in a centered perspective, there absolutely should be life by probability alone. Probability is in the favor of there being other life. And like the fact that humans have this egotistical thing, well, we should know what it looks like. It's like, give yourself a little bit of humility, be centered with it and be like, we know a lot, but we don't know everything. So it could be stuff that we can't see. And then on like another level of that too is, if you believe in like the many universe theories or other dimensions and stuff, there could be extra dimensional beings. Like there's this whole spectrum of possibilities. But I think that that's interesting. And I had thought that they had found some evidence of life on Mars earlier already. Like I thought they had like a meteorite from Mars that had like microbes in it or something. I could be remembering incorrectly. I'll have to look that up. I thought about that as I was reading the thing. I was like, didn't they already find stuff?
I'm not sure.
The next one that comes up is giant canyons discovered in Antarctica. And it says scientists have discovered 3 vast canyons in one of the last places to be explored on Earth, under the ice at the South Pole. The deep troughs run for hundreds of kilometers, cutting through tall mountains, none of which are visible at the snowy surface of the continent. They found it with radar. And then it really talks about how one of the issues with these canyons is they can actually accelerate ice sliding into the ocean and then adding water to the ocean, making the ocean levels rise. And that will also decrease the salinity of the ocean, which would change the whole flow of everything and kill creatures as well. What's your take on that?
Is this, I feel like I've heard this. Is this unearthed because of melting though? Because I do think that we're in trouble with, you know, with the global warming and the ice melting. Like, I know that there's a lot of debate on whether that's true or not, but I think that there is changes occurring, and we're, you know, we're responsible for it. I mean, nothing else has changed except what people have been doing in the last couple hundred years.
For sure. Yeah, I'm of the mindset that it doesn't have to be specifically one or the other. We've definitely helped this process, and there's definitely something going on. I'm not a scientist, but I've observations of just being a human being and seeing the way shit's different.
Yeah. Even like I forget, where are you? Are you in?
I'm in Ohio.
Okay. So I'm in New York, and I definitely even see like the changes in the seasons from like what I remember is when I was younger. Like it's been a screwy, like weird, like spring for us. It's been like cold and super hot, and like, so I don't know. It's just been very, very strange. Like the seasons melt, like just weird, not what it was. But I'm of the mindset, like, do I think that we need to make a change and like be more conscious of what we're doing? Definitely. But do I think that, I really think at the end that Mother Nature will win whatever we decide, like whether we stop or we don't. Like either we're gonna, you know, kill ourselves off or not, and we'll figure it out. But I think nature will fix it. I feel like it's like a pendulum, like with anything, like it swings all the way to one side and then it swings all the way to the other side, but it's always gonna come back. Like, and I think it's bigger than us as a race, you know. I mean, I think it's up to us. Like, if we want to keep living the way that the life we are now, then maybe we should slow up what we're doing. But if we don't care and whatever is going to happen is going to happen, I think that like everybody talks about how, being kind to Mother Nature and the earth and Gaia and all that stuff. I think that it's up to her to be kind to us, because I think she's going to fix herself.
Yeah, I definitely agree that the earth naturally has systems in it which will right whatever we're doing. Yes. And it's just a matter of if we want to survive.
Do we want to be there for it?
Yeah. We have to come again back to this centered point, take accountability and responsibility for what we're doing, and then stop living off of fear, of which a lot of the reason that this shit's happening again goes into fear of corporations wanting to have all this money to continue their growth. So they're living in unharmonious ways to create profit.
Well, it's fear of change, right? Like everybody's afraid of getting away from fossil fuels because that's all they know. But, like they're afraid of what the new possibilities are, because they don't know, where that puts them. If you're a company that mines oil, like you can change and be a company that does solar power, but you're used to your old ways and you're afraid of trying something new. You're afraid of the change that's coming.
Yeah, they lose their power if it switches to something like solar power or something like that. Not the source of power, but they lose the monopoly that they have on everything is what it is. So again, it goes into fear. And they know what'll happen is things, because that's the thing, it'll actually decentralize some of the power from them. So it's funny how we're talking about being centered, but it's like it'll actually center the power structure on, disperse it more rather than it being a focused, unbalanced space of centralized power.
Right. But at the end of the day, I feel like the only thing that's guaranteed is change. And no matter how long it takes, you can't fight. You can't fight change. I think that people have forever been trying to like stave off change. You know what I mean? Like, and it's just something that you can't fight. Like you can't stop getting older. You can't stop all these processes. But you just have to go with it, and you have to accept that change is the only thing that's guaranteed.
For sure. I forget if it was Epictetus or Heraclitus of the philosophers that said the only constant is change. But I definitely agree with that concept. One of the things Alan Watts talked about at one point too is like life being this kind of river, and a lot of times people are trying to swim against the current. And when you can actually learn to use the current to your advantage and swim with the current of everything, like swim with the changes, if you will, then you're in a better position to have the quality of life you want, accomplish what you want, and get to where you're going, rather than fighting this huge rush of reality. And that goes back again to accountability, which is about like accepting what is, taking your own accountability for it, and then directing your actions based on reality, and being in a centered point with it, rather than being on one side. It's interesting how all these topics are universal. Yeah.
And I mean, for example, I don't know where this came up the other day, but we were talking about cockroaches for some reason, and they're historically the animal that like survives everything. But the reason that they survive everything is because they flow with the change. They will eat anything. They can they just adapt, and adaptability is the thing that decides like who survives and who doesn't. You know what I mean? And adaptability is just accepting the change. Yeah, it sucks that the whole we got hit by a meteorite and the whole world was on fire. It sucks that it was the world was frozen for a while, but you go with it, and that's it. Change is really, and I think in anything, in a relationship, in a job, like if you're able to adapt, it doesn't, that's what makes you valuable and successful. It's the adaptability, not like, yeah, you could be super smart and super good at your job, but if you can't adapt to the changes that are coming, then you're going to get left behind, essentially.
And that goes back to the whole Buddhist concept of non-attachment and letting go, and just not needing to become so attached to an ideal, to a relationship, to this or that, that like you can flow with changes, because the only thing that really hurts us is our attachment to specific things.
That's true. Definitely.
I have one more headline, but I actually feel like we're in a good space with everything, and I don't really feel like throwing it out there. I feel like we've kind of ended on a good note. We'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, sounds good. This
Thank
was
you
fun.
so much for your time. Yeah, I enjoyed it as well too.